go!
It's r2youtube.com. That's R2 youtube.com, and tell them Velvet sent you. Oh yeah.
It's going down. This is Rasslin Rage. Do it now. This is Rasslin Rage. Scream it out loud. This is Rasslin Rage. Cody Fleming is the man who leads the brigade.
Hello, everybody. It's Cody here from Rasslin Rage, and today I'm joined by Deuce Diamond, referee and former professional wrestler. All right, so Deuce, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So, we've had a lot of different conversations. I always enjoy sitting down with you after the shows and talking, so it's good to get you on. So you've been in professional wrestling since 2006, am I right?
Actually, a little bit longer than that.
Ooh, wow.
My actual debut was in 2005, like in April. I just looked up the paperwork on it. There was a Bluewater show at the, I want to say it was some kind of sports dome complex.
Oh, yeah.
The show was down there in late April. The main event on that show was actually Marty Jannetty versus Buff Bagwell, and I was part of a 10-team battle royal.
Oh, nice. Okay, so 2005, so roughly 13 to 14 years, give or take. So how many of those 14 or 13 years were in the ring actively wrestling?
Actively, I was wrestling until 2015, so a little over 10 years.
Oh, 10 years. So now you had to retire. What actually caused you to, why did you have to retire?
Well, I had to retire because of an injury in my knee. I was wrestling against the Evans brothers, and I had Ace Evans up on my shoulders, executed a Canadian backbreaker, which is an over-the-shoulder backbreaker where I dropped to my knees, and apparently what I wasn't aware of until 2 weeks later was that I had Baker cysts in both knees, and one of them ruptured.
Oh, no.
And the only way I found out about it was having to try to squat down, and then when I tried to stand up, I had no power in the leg.
Oh, man. So, I mean, it was probably one of the hardest things you had to do was decide, you knew you had to hang it up, but that had to have been, if it was something that I loved to do, it would be devastating to me. So what was that like for you to have to come to the decision to say, you know what, it's time to hang it up?
Well, it wasn't like it was a surprise to me in any regard, only
Right.
because of the fact that I started so late. I was already 40, well, let's see if it was 2005. I was already 33 when I started. So I started late.
Right.
And I figured I was only going to get about 10 years in, and I was about right, as it turned out. My knees just couldn't handle it any further.
Oh, okay.
So
well,
I was already ready to start looking at it, but I was trying to just see how much longer I could get out of my knees.
yeah. So you transitioned from, active in-ring wrestling into a referee role, which, you're part of the business. So it's a different thing, obviously, but, everybody says that the ref, is one of the most important players in the game as far as the match goes. But what was it like for you to transition into that role? And did you have any obstacles doing that?
Well, the transition wasn't as tough as you would think for me because of my background. Before I got into wrestling, I had been an umpire for Little League and high school baseball for almost 20 years before that. So the officiating part came no problem to me. It was almost a natural if you were to even ask Andrew Darcy. It seemed like it was something that came easy to me, and I actually, throughout my career when I was wrestling for those 10 years, I was also refereeing on a lot of those shows.
Oh, really?
So there was a time that I was actually refereeing, and I had a mask gimmick that I would do where I kept a hood on, and basically I would referee on the card, put the hood on, do a match, and then go right back to refereeing for the rest of the card.
Wow, I didn't know that, so I learned something new every day. Imagine that.
Yeah, you might be surprised who's underneath the hood sometimes.
Right. So what's something you enjoy about refereeing, being a referee?
Well, I like being part of the industry. It keeps me involved, keeps me doing stuff. I love being around the guys and seeing people that I had either seen on TV or I know I'm going to be seeing on TV at some time in the future. So it's always interesting to be able to see those people.
Right.
You had asked earlier about any kind of obstacles. Well, pretty much the biggest obstacle I ran into was myself.
Okay.
And it's funny to say that because the one problem I ran into all the time was I heard it from Terry Hopper. I've heard it even from Raven that I was big for a referee. And a lot of the promoters want to see a smaller referee to make the wrestlers look bigger in the ring.
Gotcha.
So there's been times that I actually one time was out to referee up in Sault Ste. Marie, a show that had a couple of cruiserweights on it. And I remembered actually hearing someone in the crowd say the referee was bigger than the cruiserweights in the match. So it's a drawback, but I always try to spin it in a positive for the promoter because the minute he sees me and says you're too big, my reaction to him is, well, it should be easy for me to sell being able to get in between these guys. The biggest problem everybody forgets about is the referee has got to not only be the law in the ring, but they got to be willing to step in front of these guys a little bit too sometimes.
Yeah,
and if
for
they
sure.
want to have that confrontation or if they want a referee in there, does it look real to have a guy that's half the size in there trying to push these two guys apart? And do you think that he's really going to be successful in doing it?
Right. And it has to be believable too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Now, so you said you debuted in 2005 in Bluewater Championship Wrestling.
Yep.
So it would be safe to say that you did a training like through a wrestling school.
Yes.
Okay. And typically that's what, how long does that usually run,
Well, it's
Basic.
dependent on each person, dependent on how quickly they learn the trade, and depends on the school. If you went to a school like Truth Martini's, I think he does his anywhere around 10 to 16 weeks, I think.
Okay. All right.
And he's doing his, I think, 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even more. I'm not sure. Where I went through was through Bluewater Championship Wrestling, and at that time, Andrew's training was being done once a week, so I would have to do the drive down on Sunday. I would drive down Sunday morning, leave my house around, I think, 5 in the morning, get down to Port Huron around 9 o'clock, train till about 2 or 3, and then I'd be driving back home that night just to get back to work on Monday.
Holy smokes.
And I was doing that every week for about a year and a half, I want to say it was.
Holy moly. Now, let me ask you. So 2005, you did your training, you debuted. What has changed in wrestling, in the industry, in the business? Like, what's the one thing you've noticed the most compared to 05 to 2019?
Well, it's very obvious. The one thing I've seen change has been 2 things. One, the skill level has gone dramatically up with the workers that you see
Right.
nowadays. Some of the younger guys that are down there at Bluewater, like Cyrus Satine, Alex Weir, Billy Ray Daniels, those guys have got a lot of skills that a lot of the guys that I've known didn't have.
Right.
But the other thing that really has changed has been how much information gets planned out.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was trained, you learn your beginning, you learn your cutoff spot, you learn your finish, call the rest of it in the ring. And it seems like a lot of the guys nowadays, they may learn that, but to see them actually do it is few and far between. Most of them are actually scripting out everything in the back, and they're not even considering the fans. They're expecting the fans are going to come along rather than bring the fans along.
Well, now, with calling it in the ring, because you're feeding off the fans, right? You're feeding off the fans,
Yep.
and you're calling as the things are happening and you notice what's going on and so on and so forth. Do you think that you get a better reaction from the crowd with calling your match in the ring?
I believe you do, because if you're not in the ring calling the match, if you're calling every one of your spots that you've called out in the back, you're expecting the crowd's going to pick up on everything you're doing. And while some of the fans are smart to this and are getting used to this, you're still going to have your group of fans that are not your smart indie fans, they're your traditional WWE fans who are familiar with a certain type of formula. They see these guys come out there and do spots that either they haven't seen before, or a sequence of moves so fast that they can't register it. It takes a little bit of time for the crowd to gauge that and see it and say, hey, what did I just see? And then they're like, oh, okay. By the time they've already figured it out, they've missed 3 or 4 other spots that they had put in there, and they're still trying to process everything. If you do it in the ring and call the spots in the ring, you don't have to do 15 moves to get the crowd's reaction. All it takes is one move, let the crowd react to it, and then do your next spot. Give the crowd a little bit. Don't give them everything at once.
Right. Yeah. Keep them wanting more, most definitely.
Exactly.
So now you, in 2000, what was last year, December, Bluewater Championship Wrestling, put you up in their elite class, which is, like the equivalent to their Hall of Fame. So
Yes.
That was a pretty big deal. And you got a really sweet ring. I don't know any organization in the state of Michigan or anywhere besides WWE that does a ring. But you got a nice ring, and you got a plaque, and you guys got a little ceremony during the Headlock for Hunger in December with you and Sean Casey and Chuck Wagon. That's a pretty big deal. What was that like for you? Like were you like ecstatic, or did it take a lot for you to hold it back? I mean, be honest with me here.
I was humbled.
Right.
To be honest, I mean, it sounds cliche to hear because everybody's going to say it, but I really was humbled because I had spent so much of my time wrestling, and the funny thing is so much of that 10 years was not wrestling in Bluewater, because Bluewater had gone on hiatus almost a year and a half after I got trained. So I was busting my butt all around the state trying to get doors opened for myself and for what ends up being for these guys before me, or that came after me, and Alex Weir, and that. I'm not taking credit for doing this stuff and getting their name out there, but the fact that I was one of the first guys that Andrew had that was getting noticed and getting around the state, at least it made them say, hey, Deuce came from Andrew, maybe we should check out these other guys and give these other guys a break. That was something that wasn't really afforded to me when I started out.
Right, for sure. Now, let me ask you, you did a lot of tag matches, back in the day, Motor City High Rollers. You had a couple different tag partners.
3 of them.
Right. So there's the big thing now everybody's talking about, AEW, right? And you got the Young Bucks, big. There's a lot of debate on, a lot of people say they're the best or one of the best tag teams in the world, blah, blah, blah. But they're talking about they want to make tag team wrestling a focal point of AEW. So do you feel like tag team wrestling has kind of went away and it does need to come back? Because, I mean, you watch a lot of this stuff on TV and there's not a lot of tag team going on.
No, and you're right. I do think it needs to come back. I can agree there. To me, tag team wrestling is a lost art. The easiest way to say it is there's a few tag teams that I can name off that they have done things that you will not see anybody else do. The Midnight Express, any version of the Midnight Express. You talk about the Four Horsemen with Arn Anderson or Tully Blanchard.
Yeah, for sure.
You bring those guys up. You bring up the Rockers. You bring up names of teams that were teams for a long time. that kind of continuity when you're together, and even I guess you could say the Young Bucks when you go into it, and the Motor City Machine Guns. You look at what some of these guys have done. There's a lost art that is not really seen. There's a difference between two individual wrestlers wrestling together and two guys working as a team. You start to see, especially if you were to look at the Midnight Express and the Four Horsemen. When you look at those two teams back in the old days of WCW and the NWA, there was no doubt you were going to see stuff with those guys in the ring wrestling that you weren't going to see with, say, Lex Luger and Sting wrestling, two singles guys that were a popular tag team. You weren't going to see that kind of stuff. You could even say the same with the Steiner brothers. Those guys all brought something unique that was unique to tag team wrestling.
For sure.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick, I mean, we're getting towards the end here, but real quick, I mean, so we got, there was WCW and then there, ECW and WWE, and then there was only one, the Big Fed. Mm-hmm. And then, the independents gained a lot of popularity here within the last few years. And now we have All Elite Wrestling, trying to come in. I wouldn't even say trying. They are coming in. What's your take on it? I mean, there's a lot of back and forth. There's people that are like, I want them to fail. I want them to succeed. I mean, I think we all should want it to succeed, but what's your take on it? Do you think they got what it takes?
Well, I think that AEW does have what it takes. The question is going to be whether or not they can sustain it for the long term. When you're talking the way this stuff is done right now, the fans, I think, need to temper their beliefs. When you have
enjoy the show.
Yeah, enjoy the show. When you've got a company come in like AEW, you can't go into this and say, oh, they're going to put the WWE out of business. It's not going to happen. The WWE is a multi-million-dollar company. They've already ran one billionaire out of the business. They're not going to – I don't know if they're going to – they don't need to prove that they can do it. They've already done it once.
Right.
So, they got to – AEW, to survive, in my opinion, needs to do one thing, and that is be AEW. That is the mistake that Impact made in its early days with TNA and so many others. When WCW folded, we saw all these other companies come in, and they were basically WWF light.
Right.
Nobody wants to see that. Everybody wants to see something new. That's why Lucha Underground did so well for the time being that it was on. It was something new. It was something different. They were being themselves, not something else.
For sure.
AEW needs to do the same thing. And as long as they go down a path of being themselves and not trying to do the same thing everybody else has done, they will have they'll have a viable contender they'll be a viable contender for the WWE. There's no doubt about it. It's just going to take time, and don't expect it to happen overnight.
Oh, heck no, for sure not, definitely not. And WCW was around for many, many, many years before it even started to compete on that level. All right, well, listen. Last question, Deuce. What piece of advice have you received that's benefited you the most in your career? And what's a piece of advice you'd give somebody coming into the career or coming into the business of wrestling?
Well, the best advice I was given was pretty much straight up: don't quit. If you've got your foot in the door, keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. Get your name out there the best you can. Breaks will come, and it's just a matter of finding them.
For sure.
For somebody new coming in, the best I can say is temper your belief. Decide what you want to do before you get involved. If you're looking to do this at a local level, that's great. If you want to do this at a regional level, again, that's great. If you've got the ability to get to the national or even a global level, hey, I have no problem with that. If that's what you want to do, keep doing it. But be realistic with your goals when you first start out, and make sure you're doing what you want to do. If you think you're going to get into this making money, I guarantee you're going to be disappointed. it takes there's a
Wake
lot
up
of
call,
grind.
right? Yeah.
There's a lot of grind involved. So, I mean, I've done 2 tours in Canada, and in both instances, it's not all it's made up to be. I mean, the experience is what I'm doing it for.
Right.
Nobody talks about that 16-hour drive that I had to make from Battle Creek all the way up to Winnipeg, Manitoba for the first show, and then all the drive work that's done in between shows. Nobody talks about that. We talk about the shows.
Right.
So
Yeah, for sure.
there's a lot going on in between that
Right.
needs to be looked at as well.
Right. All right. Well, awesome. So listen, before we get out of here, give out your contact information and social media. So like if a booker would like to, book you for as referee, or, if the fans want to touch base with you and say, hey, and what have you, give them all that information.
Okay. Well, my Facebook is real easy. Just look up Deuce Diamond.
There you go.
The name is spelled Deuce.
There you go.
Not very hard to find. My email address you can find is wildcard2d. That's wildcard with the number 2 and the letter D at yahoo.com.
Awesome. All right. So, and thanks so much. And also, guys, I will put his email address and I will put a link to his Facebook down in the description. So if you guys, if you're watching this and you want to reach out to him, you can do that. So, Deuce, again, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to seeing you this Saturday. Are you going to be there?
Oh, I'll be there.
All right, cool. So, yeah, we're going to be there. I'll be WrestleFest 2019. I'm looking forward to the 4-way elimination match for the Rising Star title. So it should be a good night.
Sounds like fun.
All right, buddy. Well, thanks so much again. We'll catch you on Saturday.
All right, thank you.
All right, man. Later.
We are the Death Road Army. Vehicle City villain Aaron Orion.
Black Diamond Jack Price.
The Wild Child Jody Threat.
And weaponized Alex Weir. And you're watching Rasslin Rage live on Friday nights at 8 o'clock on YouTube.